What is the most dark and chilling thing your children have said? My niece drew a picture of a man in her room that she kept telling her parents about. He had two different colored eyes, and one was gray. When asked why it was gray, she responded, "Because he can see the storm coming." We were driving down a dark, snowy highway late one evening, final stretch of a 16-hour-long road trip. My son, who was around 4 or 5 at the time, was in the back seat and becoming a bit restless. He suddenly covered his face with a blanket and announced loudly, "I don't want to get glass on my face." A few moments later, a pickup truck towing some snowmobiles pulled out in front of a tractor trailer a few cars in front of us and got hit, spinning out into the median. Fortunately, we avoided the accident completely. It was indeed a bit creepy, though, almost as though he predicted there was going to be an accident right in front of us. My 6-year-old daughter in the passenger seat a few days ago looked at me and said, "Dad, when I'm 7 I'm going to kill you." No, wait, when I'm 8. I had to ask, "So how are you going to do that?" She smiled and said, "I'm gonna drive over your head with this car." I have a 3-year-old daughter. She tells me that a red man comes into her room at night through her window. His name is Consequences and he's mean to her. She said he hurts her and stares at her while she is in her bed. She says that he comes in a spaceship with other red men. I have no idea where she would get the material for this story, and she really believes it. I've locked her window for her and pulled the blinds, all in an attempt to convince her that no one is getting in through her window. Sometimes, in the morning, she'll say, "It didn't work, Mama, Consequences got in last night again." I hope it's a phase and it will pass. When my son was small, I was talking to him about growing potatoes. I described how you bank up the earth around them as they grow, and he said I used to do that when I was an old man. I was with my sister, her husband, and their 2-year-old daughter. We were talking about loved ones that had recently passed. My father had died sometime recently. My brother-in-law went and grabbed a picture of his mother, who had died in a car crash when he was 6, to show me. When my niece saw the picture though, she started laughing. We asked her what was so funny and she looked at us and said, "That's my special friend who sings to me." I still shiver a bit just thinking about it. I was explaining to my niece the difference between things that can and can't change about people. She was confused because she'd met a set of 3 siblings and the eldest wasn't the tallest. So I told her that one day even she, an itty-bitty 4-year-old, could be taller than me, a big huge grown-up. But even if she was taller, I would always be older. She looked me serious as you like and says, "You'll be dead sooner too." Not my child, but a child I was working with in preschool. "You have a baby inside you, but you won't be a mommy." I found out I was pregnant that day and miscarried the next week. It's not something he said, but something he's done. He's named after his great-grandfather who passed away before he was born. My son would carry around a picture of his great-grandfather and just look at it or sit down with him at the dinner table. My mom stayed with us for a few months when my daughter was 3 or 4. When she moved out, the spare room was still called Nana's room. I asked my daughter to get something upstairs one day. She did and came back to me and said, "Who is that old lady in Nana's room?" Didn't go in that room ever again. My son had an imaginary friend named Sam when he was 3. He would talk to him and laugh when we weren't in the room. We would always play along with him, build his imagination and whatnot. We asked him, "What does Sam look like?" And he said, "He's small. Like me. But he's not a kid. He has black hair and black eyes." I looked at my wife and laughed and said, "That doesn't sound like a nice friend." And he replied, "Shh, he's right behind you." He wasn't allowed to play with Sam after that. I've mentioned this on Reddit before. When my son was 3 he would often talk about events and people that happened before what I never found out, but he would often talk about someone called John whose clothes were all ripped and a baby. Apparently John looked after this baby when its parents died, and sometime later my son ended up living with both of them. I'd ask questions but it usually just made him upset. I asked why John's clothes were ripped and he said it was because he works hard all day. I asked him what work John did and he said he made boxes sometimes. What kind of boxes, I asked. He said they were blue ash. At the time I had no idea what blue ash was, so I googled it and it turns out it's a tree only found in the Midwestern states in the US. We're from the UK, I'd never heard of this tree before and I'm sure my son hadn't either. That creeped me out a bit. He's 5 soon and still gets upset if I mention John and the baby. Once he shouted at me that he never wants to talk about it again. He was also afraid of knives from a really young age, he'd freak out whenever he saw one. For the record, I don't really believe in past lives, but I think it's pretty neat to think about. I don't know if I came out with similar stuff as a child, but I did have a very strange dream that I think complements my son's stories. When he was only a few days old, I dreamt that both of us were on a farm. I don't know how I knew the person I was with was my son, as he was a boy aged around 10. Strangely, although not strange to me in the dream, I was also a young boy, maybe 4 or 5. We were brothers and we were standing in a barn during a thunderstorm. I was scared and holding his hand. We were wearing very raggedy clothes too. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.